Hey guys, so you just got pre-approved and your lender told you $200,000 is your maximum budget. What does that really mean? How much house can you afford? And what's the full breakdown? Hi, I'm Carlos Colon with Georgia Permanent Homes. That's our topic today. Let's get started. All right, you guys, so let's get started with how a lender really gets to a pre-approval in the first place. It's important to understand that they operate off of ratios for everything that they do. And so the first most important ratio is the debt to income ratio. All right, what we're really talking about here is they're going to ask you how much income do you make? That's the first question. From that part, they're going to ask you what your debts are. Now, they pull your credit to also see this too. But they also, once you turn in your bank statements, they compare that against your bank statements to make sure that the cash flow coming in is what you said it was. Now, let's be honest. Which one do you think they're going to go by? What you said or what's actually coming in and what's going out? This one. It's going to create all kinds of questions, which is why they're going to ask for so much documentation. All right, so understand that there is a difference between those two. When it comes to the ratio, what they like to operate off of is the lower the ratio, the better. And so we want to be at a debt minimum to your income. So your income, let's call it 100% of your income, is being used up by, let's say it's 40% of your debt. However, what makes up your debt? And that's what's important to understand. We're not talking about how much gas do I spend every month, or, you know, in some cases your phone bill may not even matter. But if it's reoccurring, it will. And so that's what we're really talking about. We're talking about credit cards, your rent, we're talking about your car payments, maybe you own more than one home. And so that's what that debt is going to break down. If you have student loans, and for the sake of this video, we're going to simplify that to how much do you pay a month for student loans. If you're in deferment, that means something completely different. But let's say that, you know, you pay $100 a month for your student loans. Well, that's part of your debt, and that has to be taken into account. All right, so when it comes to loan officers, they have to keep that percentage and that ratio as low as possible. And honestly, the lower, the better. And so if you're looking at a ratio of 30 or 35% of your income, and that's it, is used up by all that stuff, you're probably going to be in really good shape here when it comes to buying a house. But if you're sitting at 50 or 60%, oh, now we got to talk about, okay, well, maybe a good chunk of that is actually a $2,000 a month rent payment, and that's going to go away when we buy a house anyway. Okay, well, that's a different story. They're going to look at that full picture. This is why it's so important to understand a loan officer should be doing this before they issue you a pre-approval letter. If they do it beforehand, that loan officer has no idea whether you'll actually approve for that amount or not. And so understand those red flags. And in order to be able to call out those red flags, you've got to understand what process they're supposed to be going by to approve you. All right, now, so let's say they approved you. All right, great, they say $200,000. Well, what comes next? All right, well, now we get to the other side of it. For them to be able to say that you can afford $200,000, they're making a couple of general assumptions. Number one, taxes. We haven't even defined the home, so how could we possibly know what the taxes are every year for it? Number two, insurance amount. So what that cost is going to be every month. You can control that during the process, but they have to jump to an assumption on a certain number. You need to ask them, what have you assumed on these two things to get to $200,000? That way I know what you're talking about and what assumptions you're making. Because if we're talking about Henry County versus Beaufort, those taxes might be very, very different. And the higher the taxes, the less I can pre-approve for. So pre-approving, if $200,000 is my max, the taxes from Henry County to a Beaufort property are very, very different. We need to make sure that they've assumed that the taxes are going to be relative to the area that I'm looking in. So if they haven't asked you what area you're looking in, make sure to tell them so that they comparatively make that the correct assumption on the amount. All right, next is going to be the principal balance. That's the common sense stuff, and obviously the interest rate as well, which is how much house are you trying to buy, okay? A conversation that a lot of loan officers don't have with you on the front side, which they need to start having with you, involves community associations and HOA. Okay, so just understand, there's really 4 letters that they use, PITI, to add these numbers up. Principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. But there really should be an H in there, which is the HOA. If there's an HOA in the community, and let's say it's $1,500 a year, well, divide that by 12 months, and we need to add that back into that payment because it does affect your payment. And now, we may not approve for $200 anymore, depending on how high the HOA is, and in a really high HOA neighborhood, we may only approve for $180,000. When it comes to 55 and older communities, this makes a big difference. And so you need to make sure that you speak to your agent and loan officer about this to make sure that we're planning correctly. All right, so we're going to give you the numbers breakdown here. That way you can kind of understand what that looks like. And just keep in mind what we talk about on the ratios, that we're looking at the lower, the better. General consensus here is when you do the math on this, and you really could do the math on this yourself if you wanted to at home. If we can stick to, we bought a home, and maybe we don't have a rental anymore, so we can exclude that income. We want to stick to under 45% as much as possible. Okay? For most lenders, that's going to be a good thing. If we're squeaking by with 50% of our income being used, that's not a good thing. And now we've got to talk about how do we get you to the right lender that's going to work this file correctly for you so we don't get a denial letter the week of closing. All right? So let's look at the numbers. So let's break this down. We've got a $200,000 pre-approval. Okay? So what it adds up to is what we talked about, PITI. And then we're going to create a section here called HOA. Now, HOA could also be Community Association Disclosure. So just sometimes those terms are used interchangeably. And in some cases you may have both, by the way. Just make sure that you understand that sometimes you have overlapping what we call a master association and then another one and they're both mandatory. And you have two fees that go into it. Understand all the fees that are involved. This is going to be the easier section to estimate. That's going to be the principal and the interest rate, mainly because the lender controls these things. This one, taxes, is going to be very specific on your, number one, size of home, number two, the area. Okay? And so make sure that you're looking at those numbers correctly and that you let the loan officer know. Okay? Because you can control that, the estimate, based on what we're looking for in a particular area. This one is really fun. That's actually insurance. The reason I call it fun is because you can control it. And a lot of people won't tell you this, especially a loan officer. You can take things out of your insurance and change your deductible before closing to lower how much you pay per month. And so maybe I have a brand new home. Why should I have a $1,000 deductible? Maybe I only need a $2,500 or $5,000. Well, just know that typically there's certain restrictions based on your lender. Ask your lender, what are the minimum requirements for my insurance, my home insurance? And then just talk to your insurance company that you're planning on using about taking out what you don't need in order to control that. So, okay, now, I'm going to be very specific here. When we're talking about insurance, we're talking about home insurance. We're not talking about another section here. I'm going to put it below this, which is called PMI. All right, sometimes it's just called MI. This is mortgage insurance. That is not the same thing. These are different things. This is actually something else, depending on your loan and what your down payment is, that is included in this monthly payment. We need to talk about this with your lender as well. If you're taking out an FHA loan, I guarantee you, it will have PMI or MI, depending on how they call it. Okay? And so how much is what we want to know. Talk to your lender. That'll help estimate what the costs are. Okay? Make sure that they're fighting for you to get this cost down as much as possible, because this is just money that you spend out of your pocket to protect the mortgage company against your possible default of paying the loan. They make you pay for it. All right, so this is a breakdown of the payment. All right, so it looks like a lot, but let's really talk about the main things that you need to be concerned with. PMI or MI, number one. Number two, taxes. And number three, your home insurance. All right, those are the main three conversations. And then at that point, depending on what kind of home you're looking for or the location or style of neighborhood, HOA. All right? All this goes into calculating your monthly payment and then how much you can afford. So a $200,000 pre-approval is not just a $200,000 pre-approval. When they give you that, they've usually already estimated PMI or MI, depending on your loan type. Now, if you have a VA loan or if you have a conventional that you're paying 20% down on, you would not or should not have PMI in your loan. Speak to your loan officer and your agent about that too, okay? So that'll help you pre-approve for the correct amount as well. So we've summarized the monthly payments and the assumption of what I'm going to pay per month, and this is what a loan officer uses. Now let's talk about the numbers and how that breaks down to your pre-approval when it comes to your income to debt. Let's say you make $100,000 a year. Depending on what you do for a living will depend on how they calculate this. If you're a business owner, they're not just going to take your income. They're going to look at your tax statements to see how much past what you spend on deductibles do you get to keep every year. When I say deductibles, I'm talking about tax deductible items at the end of your year. If you show $100,000 in income and you own your own company, and you also show $100,000 or $120,000 in debt that you paid out, it looks like you make negative $20,000 or $10,000 per year. Can you afford a home? Well, the loan officer is going to say no unless you rewrite your taxes. And so just make sure you understand that from a business owner perspective. Okay? So, $100,000 a year, to keep it simple, let's say that we're dividing that up now by 12 months. All right, so the breakdown is $8,333 per month, not per pay period. All right, now, is this pre-taxes, post-taxes? I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to keep it simple. So, now let's talk about your debts compared to this $8,000. Caitlin's like, this ain't fucking simple. I don't know what you're talking about. You lying. Let's say out of those $8,000, $2,500 of that I pay out in rent. I'll make credit card payments. I'm just going to lump them all. I have 3 credit cards. And on those 3 cards, I pay out $1,200 per month. Okay? What else? Car payment. Then I have a car payment. That car payment's going to be about, let's assume it's about $500. What else could I possibly have? Well, the list goes on, but let's, for the sake of most of the general public, let's say we have student loans. On student loans, every loan company is going to do it a little bit differently. Sometimes you can calculate just the total amount and do a percentage of that to count against you on your debt. Other times, if you really are making that payment per month, they have to use that payment per month. And sometimes they can actually have you renegotiate this payment to lower it so that you can raise your qualification amount. For the sake of this conversation, let's just say it's $100 per month. So I'm going to be paying on that until I'm dead. We add them all up. $2,500 plus $1,200 plus $500 plus $100. We get to $4,300. This is per month. So my debts in this case equate to $4,300 out of $8,333. Now, debt to income ratio. Debt. Can I do it over here? Yeah?
Yeah, don't go past HOA.
Okay. Debt, $4,300 to income. So divided by income, $8,333 equals my ratio currently. I'm at a 51.6% debt to income ratio. That's not good if I'm looking to purchase a home. But keep something in mind. When I go to buy a home, I no longer make that payment anymore, right? So this gives us our difference, and this is what the loan officer does on the front side to be able to calculate this for you. But the key is I need to be at 45% or under. That's really the way you need to think about it. And in doing this, I can work backwards, right? Because maybe I can control this number, and so if we get rid of this, we're going to work backwards here between these two numbers to find out how much total I can do here, to find out what my maximum mortgage really should be at 45%. Multiplied by 8,333 gives us 3,749 and some change. I'm going to keep it there for the sake of what we're talking about. So that means this number cannot go past this number. Okay? So we scratch this out. Now this is only if I'm doing it at home, just to get an idea without even talking to a loan officer. You can equate this yourself because you know what you pay every month. If you pay child support, include that in this, please. It's important. All right, so 3,749 minus 100 and 500, so minus 600, minus 1,200. I can afford $1,949 in monthly mortgage. Okay? So, all I have to do now is look at this as being the total of this combined. And then I can divide it up and break it down. Don't just simply assume that this can be the principal and interest, because that's where people screw up. So, principal and interest is a small portion of it. Well, it's actually a big chunk of it. The rest of it does make a big difference though. So if I'm taking an FHA loan, talk to your loan officer. Hey, how much PMI are you charging me to do this loan? Estimate that into the numbers. What are the taxes probably going to cost me at the particular price point I want to be in? And then what am I going to pay every month in home insurance? Speak to your insurance company about it. And try to lump them together, by the way, your car and your home. It saves a lot of money that way. Am I in an HOA or a community association neighborhood? That makes a big difference as well. Okay? I've got $1,949 that I can pay monthly towards my payment. And so if I wanted to do that, just make sure you talk to your loan officer, estimate what this is, subtract that out of that $1,900, estimate a property around the area you're looking for, and you can look at the local tax assessors. It's public information to see what they're paying right now, depending on resale versus new construction as well. And then talk to your insurance company about how much it's going to be. Check the HOA if there is one, how much is it per month, and if it's paid yearly, which most of them are, divide that up by 12 months. And then at that point, add all those numbers together, and then figure out what's remaining. That's your PI, your principal and your interest. And then you can do the calculation correctly. There are calculators that can help you do that. But in this case, it's about as deep as I want to go with you. The rest of it really should be guided with a loan officer and a real estate agent helping you along the way. All right, you guys, I hope this helps you guys understand why that pre-approval letter is not just a pre-approval letter. The mistake that people make is trusting a loan officer that has not done this correctly for you and looked at your entire picture and just goes, yeah, you can afford $200,000. To give you an example without naming names, I had a client most recently that was pre-approved correctly for $150,000. They went to a new construction community, and the loan officer, without looking at their documentation, which is everything we talked about here, okay, told them, yes, I can pre-approve you for $280,000. Do you think something's wrong? Absolutely, okay? We have to make sure that we understand that. And this is why you should work with a real estate agent that's going to guide you along the way to understand these red flags, because unfortunately, if they go down that road, what's very likely to happen is they're going to be denied, and all that thousands of dollars in earnest money is going to be lost if they cannot approve for this loan. Okay, so make sure that you understand your situation. And if you have any questions or need any help, please reach out to us. Our number is 770-314-1285. Check out our website for other properties that are available online today, www.georgiaperimeterhomes.com. Thanks, you guys. Bye.